Story 1. Hi everyone, I'm back with another story from my time working at a very popular theme park in Florida, the magical rat planet itself. This incident happened while I was working in quick food service at one of the resorts. I want to start by saying that, for some reason, children really like me. They stare at me, reach for me, and want me to hold or play with them. At church, toddlers will literally hunt me down just to nap on me during service. But in my 20s, I was actually nervous around kids. I wasn't sure what to do with them, and I doubted I'd ever be able to care for one, which is wild considering I worked at a theme park built entirely around entertaining them. Still, my interactions there were usually short and polite. One day, during an extremely busy lunch period, I was heading to the cash register when I paused to get around a large group of people. I felt a small tug on my shirt sleeve and looked down to see a chubby little baby hand holding the fabric. The baby girl was adorable big blue eyes, not a single hair on her round head. I spoke to her gently while her mother held her, smiling proudly. The baby suddenly reached her arms out toward me like she wanted me to pick her up. Her mom immediately gushed about how that never happened. She explained that the baby was not usually social and didn't like other people. As I mentioned, I was used to kids acting this way around me. Her mother told me it was okay to hold her and moved her a little closer. I found myself stuck. I didn't know this child, but interacting with tiny humans came with the job. I also didn't want to seem rude or unfriendly. The baby still had her arms lifted toward me, so I said, "Just for a second," and picked her up. She was very chunky and extremely cute. I chatted with her as she relaxed comfortably on my hip. Then I looked up and realized her mom, dad, and grandmother had disappeared into the crowd. They were gone. I didn't even know their names. I didn't know the baby's name. I had no identifying information at all besides what they looked like. So there I was, walking around the resort for 30 minutes, holding a happy baby and trying to find her family. Eventually, one of my managers came out. I quickly explained the situation and tried to hand him the baby. He backed up with his hands raised and said, "Manager, that's all you. You have to find her parents." Me, confused and stressed expression. Baby, completely calm and content baby expression. Another 10 minutes passed as I continued searching. Finally, I spotted the grandmother, and she immediately tried to turn around and walk away when she saw me heading toward her with the baby. I caught up, handed the baby back, and she looked almost disappointed to take her. People, you cannot just leave your baby with a complete stranger in the middle of a resort. They didn't leave a diaper bag, a bottle, or anything. They literally handed me an infant and vanished into the crowd. Father above, help us all. Needless to say, after that day, I never held another guest child again. Not even for a second. Edit. Security wasn't called because, unfortunately, this type of situation was not uncommon and still isn't. If the police were called every time a parent ditched their child at the magical rat planet, law enforcement would have to permanently live there. My incident was one of many, and that's the unfortunate truth. Story 2. Hi everyone, the entitled parent in this story was actually my then wife, and it was a factor in what caused us to divorce. So as a starter, my wife, who I will call Emily, was always a bit entitled, as she had grown up with wealthy parents and truly was one of those keep me in a lifestyle to which I have become accustomed types. I accepted that because I knew it was her parents that had made her this way, and that these learned behaviors could be unlearned just by existing in real life, and she truly had a wonderful side. She could be generous and loving and truly cared about the people she allowed into her life. I think this also played into her entitled parent status though, because she expected others to be as generous as she could be, and was fiercely and blindly protective of our children, unable to see how she or they are in the wrong, until after the fact when I had explained it to her in great and excruciating detail. All this to say, she had a big disconnect between how she should behave and her expectations of others, versus what is actually appropriate and realistic expectations of strangers. With that picture painted, here's what happened. We were at Tesco's with my youngest daughter, who has mild autism and struggles to understand social situations. You may also know that people with autism have a distorted sense of self and can be very self-centered. My daughter collects Funko Pops and is currently obsessed with Harry Potter. She needed the Luna Lovegood with the lion headdress one, and every time we went into Tesco's, she would run to the toy aisle to see if they had it. We could have ordered it online, but we promised to get her it if it was there, and this hope made it far easier to manage having her end whatever activity she was doing at home, and to get her in the car. She struggles with transitions, and these can be hugely stressful for her. So on this occasion, we arrive at Tesco's, and she runs right to the aisle. We follow behind at a distance to allow her time to browse without us looking over her shoulder. She's been out of sight for no longer than a minute when we hear her scream. We both ran over in a panic and found my daughter trying to pry the coveted pop out of another young girl's hands. This young girl is in a wheelchair and clearly has severe learning difficulties. I know you will judge my daughter here, but please do keep in mind that she has autism and associated learning disabilities herself. The girl in the wheelchair is trying to hold the pop out of reach, and her mom is standing to the side of her, trying to get between my daughter and hers without touching my daughter. A trying task. My wife stomps over and immediately starts on the mother. "Don't you dare touch my daughter." The mom, with the patience of a saint, looks at my wife and says, "I'm not. I am trying to stop her hurting my daughter." I get a bit annoyed at this, because my daughter has never been violent with anyone, but can see why she would make this assumption given what was happening. My wife did not see this. She instantly started shouting, "How dare you? What do you think she is? Some kind of monster? She would never hurt an R-word person. She just wants the pop. If you would just give it to her, she would leave you alone." She looks at the girl and says, "Give it to her now." The mom instantly steps into my wife's face and very calmly warns my wife that if she calls her daughter that again, she will beat her. My wife looks to me for help, but I just look at her. The truth is I was about to intervene on behalf of the mother. I was so full of rage at my wife at this point that she would call a child this, given our own daughter's issues, and how upset she, my daughter, had gotten when she had been called this in the past. I knew right then that this woman I had chosen to marry was a vile human being. They argued back and forth for a little while with no real resolution. Meanwhile, I grabbed and picked up my daughter to stop her trying to get to the young girl with the pop. The argument was pretty mundane, the usual things you'd expect. The mother explaining why she didn't have to give up the toy as her daughter had picked it up first. We later found out there was loads left on the shelf. It wasn't even the only one. And my then wife had the audacity to tell this woman that my daughter needed it because she has autism and her daughter didn't. At this point, I got fed up of listening and did intervene. I cut my wife off and apologized profusely to the mother and offered to buy her daughter the pop. She not so politely, but also understandably, declined. As she made her way away, my wife began screaming at me about how I should have defended her, and how I was out of order for not. I explained to my wife that I would have nothing to say to her until we got to the car. I noticed the remaining Luna Pops, and let my daughter choose another. My wife followed me around, trying to engage me in conversation, but I ignored her for the most part, and reiterated that I had no intention of speaking to her. I had never been so disgusted by anyone in my life, and the idea that this woman was the mother of my child made me feel sick. I later explained to her why she was wrong, and she began to get it, but the damage had been done. I could not be with someone who would use that word to describe someone who had it even worse than our daughter. We ended up divorcing over something else some weeks later, but in the back of my mind then, and now this was the beginning of the end. I know this didn't have much of a climactic conclusion, but I wanted to share as I think you guys will all find it interesting enough. Story 3. This happened more than 40 years ago at a Christian summer camp. I went every summer, not because I cared about the classes, but because it got me out of town for a few weeks. Plus, they had swimming, horseback riding, canoeing, and all the fun outdoor activities a kid could want. This particular incident happened when I was around 11 or 12. There was a kid there who bullied me every single summer. He was cruel, genuinely mean-spirited, and for some reason targeted me more than anyone else. When I complained to the camp staff, they brushed it off with the usual turn the other cheek or forgiveness talk. Nothing was ever done, and the cycle repeated year after year. One of the optional courses was a canoe class that ended with an overnight canoe and camping trip. Of course, the bully signed up. We paddled to a campsite by a river away from the main camp. At some point, all the kids were swimming in the river, and that boy kept dunking me under the water and holding me down. I would come up gasping for air only to be shoved under again. It happened repeatedly. After one of the times he let me up for a breath, he lunged to push me under again. That was the moment I finally managed to escape. I took a deep breath, swam underwater as far as I could down the river, and didn't come up until I was well out of his reach. When I surfaced, I could see him and several other campers frantically searching for me. I went back underwater, swam even farther downstream, and climbed onto the riverbank where no one could see me. This next part was told to me later by other campers, since I didn't witness it myself. After searching and not finding me, the kids panicked and ran to get a counselor. Apparently, they had been left unattended long enough for all of this to happen, something I still find surprising. The bully told the counselor that we were swimming, and I had suddenly disappeared. The other kids immediately told the truth, explaining that he had been holding me underwater. That set off full-scale panic. Staff from the main campground were called, and a search party began. The bully cried, convinced he had actually caused a tragedy. I am not sure how long the search lasted, but it must have felt endless to them. Eventually, I was found sitting downstream on the bank. I played it up by acting shaken and shivering. I told the counselor that the bully had held me underwater, that I couldn't breathe, and that the next thing I remembered was being on the riverbank after throwing up river water and not knowing where I was. Back at the main camp, all of the management gathered for a meeting. The bully approached me and attempted to apologize, but I acted frightened and hid behind an adult. His parents were called, and he was sent home, immediately banned from camp permanently. My parents were also contacted, and the camp staff apparently panicked when my mother answered the phone with law offices, since she worked as my attorney father's secretary. I spoke to my parents and told them I wanted to stay at camp, and they agreed. They weren't the type to pursue lawsuits, and the rest of the summer was wonderful without that kid around. I continued attending for a few more years until I eventually aged out. I haven't thought about this incident much over the decades, and I wish I had talked to my parents about it when I had the chance. My mother has passed, and my father now has dementia, so I'll never hear their perspective. For what it's worth, my parents weren't religious. I only went to the camp because my favorite cousin went. As for that bully, I sometimes wonder what became of him. With how cruel he was at such a young age, I genuinely hope he grew out of it and didn't continue down a harmful path. Story 4. I am back again with another story about my entitled upstairs neighbors. I live in a 20-unit complex with upstairs and downstairs tenants, and I am in a downstairs unit. I have been having issues with them ever since they moved in almost 2 years ago, and I was under the impression that they were moving out or were getting evicted. But unfortunately, that is not the case. There are 3 grown adults and a large dog living in an upstairs 1-bedroom unit with an area that would be considered small for just one person living there, let alone 3 adults and a dog. I will not go into detail about the things they have done, as that is a story on its own, but let us just say they are not nice people. They are loud, inconsiderate, and constantly getting drunk or smoking illegal substances. This happened yesterday. Around 10 in the morning, I heard them arguing, which started off mild. They do this all the time, so I am used to it, but it slowly grew louder as they started getting drunker. Around 6 in the evening, I saw them drive their car up the driveway and park in my car space, which is beside my unit. I have surveillance cameras outside and a dog inside. One of the tenants, a 30-year-old woman I like to call Crystal, stepped out of the car carrying a large box. She did not get far before the bottom of the box broke, and the contents, a few cartons of glass beer bottles, dropped onto the concrete driveway, smashing most of the beer onto the ground. I have to commend them for the comical performance that followed, as Crystal and her mother, Brandy, spent the next 5 minutes half-heartedly clearing up what was salvageable, which by the looks of it was not much. They then walked back to their unit, leaving behind most of the glass, cardboard, and other rubbish they were too lazy to clean up. A large trickle of beer ran down the driveway, decorated with shards of glass that now covered a large portion of the driveway, leaving behind the strong smell of cheap beer. The driver of the car, who I sincerely hope was not drinking, drove away not long after. At 6:30 in the evening, the police arrived, entered their residence, and proceeded to search their unit. This was told to me by another tenant who lives in an adjacent unit and could see into their unit. At 7 in the evening, the eldest tenant, Brandy, was arrested, handcuffed, and taken away in a police car. What followed was something I wish I could have witnessed. This was told to me by the other tenant who had a front row seat to this entire situation. A police officer watched as Crystal was made to clean up all of the leftover rubbish from the driveway by hand. I do not know what happened after this or what will happen once the landlord becomes aware of everything, which I certainly made sure of. Here is hoping they finally get evicted. Story 5. This is kind of a rant post. For context, he is 25 years old and has always been this nosy and annoying for most of my life. I had the lucky few years in another country neighboring ours for 2 years without him when I was 8 to 10 with my other brother and my father. He is the type of person to do chores and tasks just so he can have a right to say, "I am so tired, you are all so lazy," and he jumps at the chance to do them sometimes rather than doing them for the sake of upkeep of the house or because they need to be done. Most people who are not narcissists or do not have a savior complex would do them simply because they need to be done. But whenever he has in his mind enough justification to not do anything, he uses it well. For example, we had a minor crisis involving money, and we needed someone to work. He has worked in the past, but that time he was very lazy. It was summer, there was no college, and the money we needed was only until summer ended, so he would not have had to work during the school year. Apparently, he was going to do graphic design, but he only mentioned it a handful of times and gave no progress. This is just one of many examples, yet he always considers himself the one who does the most chores and such. He has always been the type to claim that. For example, he will try to convince all of us to watch a film with him for what he calls family time, but he never considers whether it would be a good family film or not, ranging from downright gore, which my mother does not like at all, to inappropriate scenes. Basically, he is too stuck up in his own world to think of anyone else, unless it makes him look better. Even today, I was not spared from his nonsense. Whenever he is in a bad mood, he will go around the house and spread it like the plague. My mother, father, and grandmother are spared, and mostly my other brother, who is 23 years old, but since I am the youngest, I get to deal with his unpleasant behavior for some reason. One time he literally gave me a black eye because I took too long to throw something in the trash. Keep in mind, this is really simplified, but at the time, when I was 14 years old, I could not fight a grown 23-year-old man. In short, I broke a cup. I had just woken up and turned on the gaming console. He was in a bad mood, gathered the broken glass, and gave me some to throw in the trash. As I held it, I was busy in my own thoughts because I had just woken up and was thinking about some things. So when he told me to throw it in the trash, I groggily and lost in my own thoughts took about 4 seconds hovering over the garbage to throw it away. He got mad and told me I took too long. I told him that even if I did, it was literally unimportant to wait 4 seconds for me to throw trash. It was just one piece. I was not waiting 4 seconds for each piece. I simply hovered for a bit, threw it, and that was all I had to throw. This repeated, and he kept getting more mad. I did not insult him even once. He threw insults and kept trying to push me. I decided I was not made for this nonsense and went into my room. He then started swinging, and if it were not for my other brother, who was 22 years old at the time, stopping him, I do not know how far it would have gone. Our couch was toppled over, I had a black eye, and he had a bite mark on his arm from trying to put me in a chokehold, which he did successfully, but he let me go after the bite. After all that, he did not even feel sorry. He instantly tried to get our other brother, who tried to stop it, to tell me to apologize to him. And yes, it felt wonderful to go to soccer practice the next day with a black eye and have to explain to all my friends that I was not being abused by my parents and that I simply fell. Even to this day, he keeps giving me trouble. For example, today I was downloading something on the gaming console. The download was long, so I closed the television. I then opened it again in front of him while he was facing the television in the room. Just an hour later, he shut off the gaming console by pulling the power cord, which could break it if done, especially during downloads. I was not too mad at him since he had a point. And when it happened, all I said was, "Hey, the console was on." I was not even yelling, and he got defensive, instantly giving a long explanation on how I should always keep the television on. Any attempt to turn the television on or off for the console, he just had to remind me not to forget that. Or when he came in to study in my room, technically, it is our second living room with 2 beds, a television, and an air conditioner. I do not sleep there. He has his own room basically to himself when we do not have a guest. It has a fan, plus a window design that gives plenty of airflow, and a huge desk for studying, his laptop, and a big monitor he uses. But no, he just had to sit in the room I was in, a room he rarely goes to besides eating or talking to my grandmother when she visits. When my parents were gone and my other brother was also gone, if anything happened, no one could stop him, and I just had to agree or not talk at all. It would be horrifying, but he has not gotten physical since then, though I still get worried because that is not directly due to any resolution. We just have not gotten into an argument since then. So when he sat down at the much smaller desk with only my laptop and 4 times less room than his own desk, while I was playing on my console, if I tried to say anything about it, he claimed he was just not leaving our grandmother alone, even though she was asleep. When he stopped studying and I went to the laptop, I was about to move his things off of it and to his room. Before I could do anything, he yelled, "Stop! I will put the things away." He angrily, and with a moody face, got up and picked the things up. He then angrily gave me a speech on how I supposedly walk like a gorilla, even acting out the original Japanese King Kong arm swinging thing from that film in silence for 5 seconds. Then he talked about how there is a small table behind the large table with a cup of water on it, and he somehow knows that I would slam the study table and drop the cup. He even physically acted it out to demonstrate. He also claimed I put stuff on it too, but told him he could not, and meanwhile I was just watching, speechless, after having said nothing. I told him I only put things there when I am eating, and that I put them away after. He then gave a second speech, angrily laughing about how I supposedly do not and such, basically saying I am somehow a hypocrite and speak too much. He acted like he said only one thing, and that he was only helping me by warning me I would drop it. He said nobody ever respects him when he helps us, acting as though he had not just called me a gorilla and given a speech on how hypocritical I was, which was very ironic. Before and after that, he will jump at any chance he has to tell someone not to do something and bask in the honor of telling someone they have to be careful and turn off one light because of electricity, as if he is the head of a homeowners association. In general, he is also a self-victimizer. For example, when he talked to my father and my mother about work after college, my father, who has over 50 years of experience and is now mostly retired in the career my brother was studying for, told him he would have to fly to another country because our country's engineering jobs were all handled by the government. My brother did agree that this was the case, but when my father literally addressed the huge, gaping void in his argument, explaining that he would have no work, it would be very hard to find a job. All jobs in that career would be filled, and he would have basically little to no pay. Before they could even finish explaining, he stormed out of the room and called them incompetent. I will thank goodness for the day this man moves out, and if he does not, when my other brother moves out, I will try to go with him. Story 6. Hi y'all, I am back with another story from my time working at a very popular theme park in Florida, a magical rat planet of sorts. Let me preface this by saying I shared this story a year ago on a few different online forums, one being a community for true scary stories. However, many of the actions of the below-mentioned individual were creepy and entitled, so I decided to retell it here. This was, to this day, one of my most terrible experiences at the magical rat planet. This situation happened when I worked in the food department at a resort where I met a man, D, who was in his 40s at the time. D was a day shift, short-order fry cook, and mostly worked in the quick-service burger area and the soup and sandwich area. Most people my age were not very nice to him because he was not considered attractive and he was very overweight. However, I was respectful to everyone, especially those who were older, so I was always kind to him and made conversation. I would even eat with him on certain occasions. D started opening up about his life. He said he was having some financial and health difficulties. He also told me about his former partner who had been physically and emotionally abusive towards him. I told him that he deserved better and that I hoped he would find someone special one day. We continued being friendly and joking with each other daily. During that time, everyone was pretending to have work wives and work husbands. It was a joke and something to do because, honestly, the job was busy but boring. D and I became work husband and work wife, which did not consist of anything different than what we were already doing as work friends. I also had 2 other work husbands, and one was even gay. One day I came to work to find everyone laughing and looking at me. I asked what was going on, and my friends jokingly said, "Congratulations on your new boyfriend." I was confused and said, "What? I do not have a new boyfriend." They explained that they knew that already, but that D had been going around telling everyone we were in a real relationship, and they found it funny. I, however, did not. I confronted D about it, and he said that he had said it. I asked him why, and he said he wanted us to be in a real relationship. I was taken aback because he was 20 years my senior, and I thought he understood we were just friends. I told him this, and he said that he had fallen in love with me. I told D that we had only known each other for a few months and that I was kind to him, and he had confused that with something more. He insisted he loved me, so I walked away. The next day, his friend C came to me and said D had been crying to her about me. She said that he had confessed to her that he loved me so much. She asked me to talk to him because he was devastated. I told her I did not feel the same way and had already spoken with him. This went on for a few days, and he continued telling people we were together while crying to see about me. I confronted him again angrily and told him to stop lying about our relationship, and he apologized. I also confronted my friends about joking, as it was not funny to me and was making the situation worse. It had even reached management. I stopped talking to D after that and kept my distance. The following week, I was working in the pizza shop with my friend P. We played around a lot with one another. He delivered pizzas to the guests in the resort, and we were discussing that when he brushed something off my shirt. D saw this as he was walking through. He stood there staring for an uncomfortable amount of time in silence before walking away. Later, after my break, I was moved to the burger area with D, and he abruptly started crying and demanded to know if P and I were together. I told him we were not, but even if we were, it was none of his business. He asked me why I was suddenly so mean to him as he loved me so much. He was crying really hard, which freaked me out. I told him to stop saying that. He said it was true, and that he would be really good to me. I told him he was making me very uncomfortable. He said he would never do anything to hurt me because he loved me too much. I told him I had not gone to management because I understood his financial issues and knew he needed this job, but if he continued, I would have no choice. He asked me not to and said that he really meant what he said about loving me. He started crying harder. I told him that he and I would never happen. His face turned very red, and he looked at me. He was crying very hard and screamed out, "I will hurt myself if I can't have you." I hate manipulation. I hate people trying to force me to do things I do not want to do. This angered me, and I told him that what he was saying was manipulative and would not work on me. He had crossed a line, and all communication between us was immediately terminated. I left and spoke with a coordinator, who was the person directly below management. The managers were in a meeting at the time. D and I never worked together again, though C said he was still devastated. I was moved exclusively to the night shift, and on the few occasions when I was needed on the day shift, it was on days he did not work.